Ashley Floor, and you know what I'm talking about here on my channel right now.
If you've been following the ongoing storm between Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni, what's about to unfold is the kind of strategic legal maneuvering that could change the trajectory of the entire case. From the start, the pre-trial phase has been anything but ordinary, and understanding how Baldoni's legal team has positioned themselves requires a detailed look at the sequence of events, starting with the filings of March 27, 2025. On that date, the court ordered a joint motion for an extension of time, allowing both the Wayfair parties and Blake Lively's team to file pre-trial motions, including motions in limine, jury instruction proposals, and responses to expert witness exclusions. While on the surface this seemed procedural, the undercurrents reveal a far more calculated chess game, one that has strategically favored Baldoni's team from the outset. Central to this strategy is the infamous Van Zon lawsuit, a legal maneuver shrouded in secrecy that operated almost like a phantom within the court system. Filed as a John Doe suit, it initially appeared to target no specific defendant, only vaguely referencing breaches of contract and reputational harm. But the deeper intent became clear. This was a calculated attempt to secure subpoena power, allowing Lively's legal team unprecedented access to sensitive materials, specifically the personal files of General Abel, Justin Baldoni's former publicist. The manner in which the Van Zon lawsuit was quietly inserted into the court system underscores how Lively's team and associated parties attempted to manipulate legal processes to their advantage while keeping the world, and the opposing legal team, in the dark. No notice was provided to Baldoni, Abel, or the Wayfair parties about the impending privacy breaches, giving the appearance of a clandestine evidence-gathering operation masked as a legitimate lawsuit. From the perspective of Baldoni's defense, the Van Zon lawsuit exemplifies what is known in litigation as a potential abuse of process. Legal experts interviewed during this phase described the maneuver as highly irregular, emphasizing that it was not a minor procedural oversight but a deliberate tactic designed to circumvent standard discovery protocols. Once the evidence, obtained through Abel's personal phone and her private iCloud data, entered Lively's possession, the question of integrity and chain of custody became unavoidable. Baldoni's legal team recognized early on that this was an opportunity. If this evidence could be shown to have been obtained improperly, it could be excluded entirely under motions in limine, fundamentally reshaping the case before a single witness even testified. Motions in limine, in legal parlance, are pretrial tools designed to determine the admissibility of evidence. In essence, they act as a preemptive strike, giving the court the ability to exclude materials that were obtained improperly, are overly prejudicial, or risk misleading the jury. For Baldoni, the motion in limine was not merely a procedural formality but a strategic lever, aimed at highlighting procedural flaws in the Van Zon litigation and challenging the validity of the evidence Lively intended to use to support her claims. By emphasizing the fruit of the poisonous tree, the principle that evidence obtained through wrongful or unlawful means cannot be admitted, Baldoni's attorneys framed the issue as both a legal and ethical problem. If the initial seizure of Abel's personal data was illegitimate, then all subsequent documents, emails, and communications derived from that action should be considered tainted and unreliable. The defense narrative further underscores the dangers of selective disclosure. Lively's team had, in media reports, already cherry-picked segments of emails and text messages to create a sensationalized storyline of coordinated misconduct or a smear campaign. However, when the broader communications are reviewed in full, they reveal a far more nuanced context, undermining the narrative that Lively initially presented. Baldoni's attorneys intend to demonstrate that these cherry-picked snippets were strategically chosen to maximize impact, misrepresenting ordinary professional communications as evidence of coordinated wrongdoing. By filing motions in limine and asserting Rule 106, the defense ensures that the jury sees the full chain of communications, effectively neutralizing the impact of selective excerpts and placing the events in their proper context. Another key focus of Baldoni's pretrial strategy revolves around the chain of custody. When Stephanie Jones, acting on behalf of Lively, accessed Abel's personal phone and subsequently transferred files to the Van Zon company, questions immediately arose regarding the integrity of that evidence. Without proper oversight, there was no way to verify that the materials were complete, unaltered, or even accurately represented. Digital forensic experts, who will likely testify on Baldoni's behalf, can illustrate how evidence handled in such an unsupervised or potentially hostile environment risks compromise. From the defense perspective, this is not a minor technicality, it speaks directly to the credibility of Lively's claims and the reliability of the evidence underpinning them. Procedural context also plays a critical role. Baldoni's team is prepared to argue that the use of the Van Zon lawsuit as a mechanism to obtain sensitive data without notifying affected parties constitutes not just a tactical misstep, but a procedural violation with the potential to be classified as fraud on the court. If the court finds that Lively and her team knowingly used a sham litigation process to gather evidence, the implications are severe. Sanctions could be imposed, evidence could be excluded, and the integrity of the entire lawsuit could be questioned. From a defense perspective, this is a high-stakes opportunity. It frames Lively's actions as not merely aggressive litigation, but as an improper manipulation of the judicial system itself. Understanding the strategic weight of motions in limine is essential. These motions allow Baldoni's team to request that the court decide the admissibility of the evidence before trial begins, potentially preventing sensational or inflammatory content from ever reaching the jury. Judges, in considering these motions, evaluate relevance, probative value, and potential prejudice. In this case, the defense's position is that the evidence obtained through Van Zon is both tainted and misleading, and therefore its admission would unfairly prejudice the jury against Baldoni. By addressing these issues in pre-trial motions, the defense ensures that the trial's narrative is not dictated by incomplete or misrepresented evidence, but by materials that have been verified and appropriately contextualized. Finally, the stakes extend beyond the courtroom. Baldoni's team recognizes that high-profile cases like this carry public relations implications that can influence perception even before any verdict is delivered. By challenging the admissibility of key evidence, the defense not only safeguards their client legally but also strategically manages the broader narrative. If the motions in limine succeed, the case that reaches the jury will reflect a fairer and more accurate representation of events, countering the misleading impressions created by selective media disclosures. This is where the pre-trial phase becomes decisive. The motion in limine is not simply a procedural tool, it is the defense's method of neutralizing Lively's most dramatic claims and leveling the playing field before the first day of trial. In conclusion, Part 1 of the defense-focused investigation demonstrates that Baldoni's team has been methodically preparing to challenge Lively's claims by focusing on procedural flaws, chain of custody issues, and the potential tainting of evidence. The Van Zon lawsuit, while seemingly obscure, becomes central to the defense narrative, exposing how pretrial maneuvers and motions in limine could fundamentally alter the trajectory of the litigation. By carefully framing these issues, the defense ensures that the court sees the case through a lens of legality, fairness, and adherence to proper procedure, a lens that significantly undermines Lively's capacity to rely on the evidence she has so publicly showcased. As the pre-trial motions unfold, the spotlight now shifts to Rule 106, the rule of completeness, and the strategic avenues Baldoni's legal team can exploit to protect their client and expose procedural missteps by Lively's team. In civil litigation, Rule 106 exists to prevent selective storytelling, ensuring that if one side introduces part of a conversation, email, or text message, the opposing side can compel the court to require that the entire communication be presented. This is critical in a case like Baldoni's, where Lively's team has already curated fragments of communications to create a misleading narrative. By invoking Rule 106, the defense can reveal the fuller context, showing that what was initially portrayed as coordinated misconduct or a smear campaign may actually be mundane or even exculpatory. From a defense perspective, this is an essential corrective measure. The jury must see the unedited story, not just the cherry-picked excerpts selected for sensational impact. The application of Rule 106 has far-reaching consequences in this case. Imagine a jury presented with only a single angry text from Baldoni or a terse email that seems incriminating on its face. Without context, jurors might assume malicious intent or deliberate sabotage. But when the defense introduces the full sequence, the messages preceding and following the snippet, any apologies, clarifications, or mitigating discussions, the apparent wrongdoing often dissolves. Baldoni's attorneys can walk the jury through the entire communication arc, highlighting misunderstandings, professional disagreements, or entirely innocuous exchanges. This not only neutralizes the initial impact of the cherry-picked content but also reinforces Baldoni's credibility, showing that Lively's team relied on selective interpretation rather than substantive proof. Layered on top of Rule 106 is the more powerful tool of Rule 37 sanctions, often referred to as the nuclear option in civil litigation. Under this provision, a court can impose severe consequences for misconduct during discovery, including evidence exclusion, monetary fines, or jury instructions that allow negative inferences against a party. Baldoni's team can argue that Lively's orchestrated Van Zon lawsuit, combined with the unauthorized access to General Abel's phone, constitutes precisely the type of abuse Rule 37 is designed to address. By filing this motion, the defense aims to protect their client not just from the immediate risk of misleading evidence but also from systemic procedural manipulation that could undermine the fairness of the trial itself. If the court grants these sanctions, the ramifications are monumental. The evidence Lively has relied upon for her claims could be stripped from the case entirely, erasing her most persuasive proof and fundamentally weakening her position from a strategic standpoint. Rule 37 also allows Baldoni's attorneys to pivot the narrative, turning the tables on Lively's team. Instead of simply defending against accusations, the defense can frame the issue as an attack on the integrity of the judicial system. The argument is clear: if evidence was obtained through a sham lawsuit, without proper oversight, and by bypassing procedural norms, the party responsible should not be rewarded with its admissibility. This positions Baldoni as a victim of procedural abuse while casting Lively's team in the role of manipulator, attempting to leverage the legal system for tactical gain. For a high-profile case, this narrative is not just legally advantageous, it is crucial for controlling the story both inside and outside the courtroom. Another critical dimension revolves around procedural fraud and the ethical obligations of attorneys. Civil litigation imposes a duty of honesty and candor to the court. When evidence is obtained through questionable channels, in this instance, Jones accessing Abel's personal phone and transferring information through a Van Zon shell company, the defense can argue that Lively's legal team violated these obligations. Procedural fraud is not a minor infraction, it strikes at the heart of the court's ability to adjudicate fairly. If proven, the consequences extend beyond evidence exclusion, potentially triggering judicial sanctions or even referrals for professional discipline. From Baldoni's perspective, this is a strategic linchpin, demonstrating procedural missteps casts doubt on Lively's credibility, her counsel's conduct, and the legitimacy of the claims themselves. The stakes for both sides in this pre-trial phase could not be higher. If the judge rules in favor of Baldoni's motions, the trial will proceed without the tainted evidence, forcing Lively to rely on less compelling materials. Conversely, if Lively's team successfully defends the admissibility of the evidence, they retain the opportunity to influence the jury with the curated snippets. Either scenario underscores the preeminence of pre-trial strategy. Much of the battle is won or lost long before the courtroom doors open. For Baldoni's attorneys, the goal is clear: to prevent misrepresentation, maintain evidentiary integrity, and ensure the jury's deliberations are grounded in contextually accurate and procedurally sound information. Beyond the courtroom mechanics, this phase also has broader implications for high-profile litigation. The Van Zon lawsuit and associated evidence tactics represent a test case for how elite individuals might attempt to manipulate legal processes to their advantage. By successfully challenging these maneuvers, Baldoni's legal team positions themselves as defending not only their client but the principle that the judicial system must operate fairly, even when powerful celebrities are involved. This case, therefore, transcends personal reputations. It becomes a potential precedent for how digital evidence, pre-trial motions, and procedural abuses are handled in future litigation involving high-profile parties. The narrative control extends further with media and public perception. Lively's team has relied heavily on press coverage and selective leaks to frame the story in the public eye. Baldoni's strategy leveraged pre-trial motions and ethical arguments to counteract these narratives before they take root with a jury. By meticulously demonstrating procedural improprieties, the defense can shift attention from alleged misconduct on Baldoni's part to Lively's aggressive legal maneuvers. This reframing is essential in high-profile trials where public sentiment can, consciously or unconsciously, influence juror perspectives. An additional dimension is the integrity of digital evidence. The initial breach of Abel's phone, followed by the transfer of data through the Van Zon lawsuit, raises profound questions about chain of custody and authenticity. Baldoni's legal team can argue that once the original files were handled by an unsupervised or potentially hostile party, there is no guarantee that the information remained complete or unaltered. Digital forensic experts will likely testify that the integrity of any evidence depends on consistent, verifiable custody. Any breaks in that chain, as occurred here, directly undermine Lively's ability to rely on the files as credible proof. This technical but critical aspect strengthens Baldoni's position. The evidence is compromised at its source, and any derivative materials inherit that flaw. The cumulative effect of these strategies, Rule 106, Rule 37 sanctions, procedural fraud arguments, and forensic scrutiny, establishes a robust defensive framework. It allows Baldoni's attorneys to preemptively neutralize sensational claims, challenge the admissibility of disputed materials, and reinforce the importance of procedural fairness. By constructing this multi-layered approach, the defense maximizes the likelihood that the jury will see a balanced, accurate depiction of events rather than a curated, sensationalized narrative. In essence, the pretrial phase becomes the battleground where the ultimate story of the case is shaped, long before witnesses take the stand. Finally, the defense strategy also addresses the psychological and reputational dimensions of the litigation. By highlighting Lively's reliance on selective evidence obtained through potentially abusive processes, Baldoni's team frames their client as the target of improper legal tactics. This is not simply a procedural argument, it is a narrative strategy designed to preserve Baldoni's reputation and mitigate potential public and jury bias. The broader lesson here is about accountability. No matter how powerful or high-profile, litigants must operate within the boundaries of the law, and pretrial strategy can serve as a critical tool for ensuring those boundaries are respected. Underscores that Baldoni's legal team has executed a highly disciplined, multifaceted defense strategy. By combining motions in limine, Rule 106 arguments, Rule 37 sanctions, procedural fraud claims, and digital evidence scrutiny, they are systematically dismantling Lively's case at its foundation. Every pretrial motion, every strategic objection, and every forensic analysis contributes to a broader goal, protecting Baldoni's interests, preserving evidentiary integrity, and ensuring that the trial, when it begins, is decided on facts, context, and procedural fairness, not selective storytelling or legal subterfuge. This defense-focused approach highlights how a carefully executed legal strategy can not only neutralize the immediate threat posed by Lively's allegations but also shape precedent and reinforce the principles of fairness and transparency in high-stakes litigation.